Hello and welcome. This is the 11th episode of the Hoppean Book Club. We are still on Socialism by Ludwig von Mises. I am your co-host Colton. I am joined by Emo.
Hello.
And so the Hoppean Book Club is just a chance for us at the Hoppean to go through books in the Austrian tradition and just libertarian books in general. It's for people to read and follow along. It's to have a discussion and commentary along with just explaining what the book is saying. We will have a commentary between ourselves, but we also want to have it with the chat. So go ahead and post questions or comments in the live chat. So we also want suggestions of books with the theme being Austrian economics and libertarianism. Other schools of libertarianism could be covered in the future, but we would do that after getting the main books of the Austrian school done. We do actually take suggestions fairly seriously. We already covered one essay by Jeffrey Tucker earlier, so any suggestion will likely get pushed closer to the top of the priority list than anything else. Do you have anything else to say, Emo?
Not really. I'm ready to get into this.
Okay. Yeah, no. Thankfully, all the technical issues we found last week have been fixed, so there's no need to do anything.
Thank God. I think that happened when we had Taylor on that one time for that one episode for like an hour.
Really?
But
What?
that was
What happened there?
it was that what episode was that? We had Taylor on for one episode, and it was the one where we spent a long time just laughing and like joking about stuff, and um but like that whole first hour ended up just not getting recorded on Kyle's side.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, no. How how this is set up in OBS is kind of odd. It's not how I set it up on my channel, so. Um,
Yeah.
anyways, this week we are doing chapter 5. Sorry, chapter 4. Social order in the family. Because it's just the two of us this week, we are only doing one chapter at a time.
Yep.
So, social, like, this really shows Mises's social values as well as just his value-free analysis of the social order. And so it's very interesting. Like, he will say some things that are completely correct, but you can really tell that his liberalism and atheism seep through some things.
Definitely. Um he goes into like some parts where he just like he doesn't really go after the church, but he does criticize them for how harshly I guess they judge sexual issues. While Mises is just like, as long as people really love each other, you know, it's actual love. But for the most part, Mises is actually very conservative at the same time.
Right, and it's actually good that he criticizes these more Augustinian inspired sexual morality because married life and the monastic life are two different lifestyles, and so um, one of the errors of Augustine was to view all sexual relations from a purely monastic point of view instead of realizing that the love between a wife and a husband is in itself sacred.
Mm-hmm. And monastic would be like just monk, no like relation at all with the other sex.
Right, so it would be monks and nuns. So for them, they are to be completely abstinent. Meanwhile, married couples are to develop a more healthy view of sexuality and to turn um, this affection towards one another, towards God, in order to help each other on the journey. Um, Meanwhile, a monk or a nun is considered to be married to Christ, and so they don't have this other person to help them on their journey.
Okay.
And
That
so
kind of explains that.
it's a yeah, no. And if you go into, like, Father Josiah Trenum has a lecture on marriage, and he actually tells husbands to surprise their wives with intimacy. Not only because it is good for the marriage itself, but also it teaches the children where they came from, because it is obvious they came from the love that the parents share for each other. Um,
Mhm.
so, for instance, he gives examples of while she's busy with something, coming up behind her, hugging her, and kissing her, like on the cheek or something like that,
Mhm.
which to this Augustinian um, set of morals that Mises is criticizing here, that would be considered a sin. And
Yeah, I think that goes way too far. Like you just can't like how are people supposed to like, how's the human race supposed to procreate or like or there even be like the leading up to love if you can't even like initiate it?
right, and Mises goes into this a lot in section 4, I believe. And so we're definitely gonna come to that and be able to criticize it, but it's not something that, like, necessarily would contradict with Christianity. It's just these variants, especially the ones inspired by Augustine, that would have an issue with any type of sensual relations between husband and wife, which is just going extremely far. Um,
Hmm.
and it's also kind of interesting that it's the West that has developed these, but it's also the West that has basically given up on monastic life.
Hmm.
And I don't know if the two are unrelated, but it does seem that this very Augustinian view of sensuality is at least correlated with this failure of monastic life. That basically they're turning marriages into, you know a more monastic lifestyle, and kind of ruining both the two vocations.
Taking the joy out of it.
Well, it's don't know if it is kind of taking the joy out of marriage, but I don't know exactly how it would affect monasticism. Um,
Mm.
it's just obviously that Western Christianity has basically abandoned monastic life, and also this kind of view of any type of intimacy between husband and wife as somehow sinful is also a part of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we get into section 1?
Sure, let's go ahead and get into it. Section 1, Socialism and the Sexual Problem. Proposals to transform the relations between the sexes has long gone hand in hand with plans for the socialization of the means of production. Marriage is to be abolished along with private property. When man is liberated from the yoke of economic labor, so too is love liberated from the yoke of economic impediments to its attainment. Socialism not only promises welfare for all, but universal happiness and love as well. Bebel's Women in Socialism being the most widely read German socialist book of the time and focusing on the concept of free love is a testament to this. It isn't strange that many find this system of regulating sexual relations that we live under as unsatisfactory. The system exerts a far-reaching influence in diverting sexual energy, which is at the bottom of so much human motivation, into new purposes to which cultural development occurs.
Right.
Um, there is a
No,
process
no, no.
by
Stop.
which every. Oh, sorry.
Right, and so this is kind of showing Mises's the foundation of Mises's cultural view that these social institutions are not restricting freedom so much as diverting natural instincts into beneficial behavior.
Right.
And
Instead of instead of engaging in just like mindless sex with other people, with random people, and like getting diseases and having children out of wedlock and stuff, instead of indulging in those, we divert those energies into more productive things that can make society better instead of just doing that.
right, and so it's and we're gonna see as we go forward that this control of natural desires into productive means is something that Mises will continue to come back on, and this really does show how the non-leftists view social institutions.
Right.
That these social institutions are not to control people qua controlling people, but to um, bring people into a better state of being.
Right. And people should be able to look around at all the things that have been created throughout not only Western civilization but other places where great things have been achieved, and just look at how these people had to restrict themselves to build civilizations. Um, and yeah, I
Yeah,
had more to say, but then I kind of lost my train of thought.
no problem.
Yeah.
It
So move on, or
uh sure, just slow down a bit in between points.
okay. I didn't hear you speaking in between that last one.
Okay.
But anyway, there is a process by which every individual must go through in life where their sexual energies take their mature form, and they must develop the inner strength to divert those energies to more productive goals. Mises was no fat gang. Not everyone escapes unscathed from the resistance of sexual desires. Some become insane or neurotic. Though sex will become the source of his greatest source of happiness, it will also become the source of his deepest pain. Its passing means age has come, and he will soon pass away like all living things. Thus, sex fools man by giving, then taking, making happy, then plunging him back into misery, never letting him sink into inertia. Waking and dreaming, a man's wishes turn upon sex. This is to be expected, as many socialist authors themselves were neurotics, such as Fourier, who suffered a grave psychosis that was evident in every line of his writing.
Right, and this is the obvious consequence of trying to struggle against the passions without the grace of God. That
Hmm.
Um, yes, it is you can. It is a choice um, to be caught up in all these passions, but it's not something that you really have the strength to completely defeat on your own. And that's why you see so many people today talk about, say, like, oh, fapping is natural and healthy, and it's actually like it's torment to not do so. But really, it's just the lack of maturity, really, um, that leads to this, and this lack of maturity really does come from the lack of faith in today's society.
I believe it.
And so how else should I put this? Taking the sexual energies into the mature form is something that young people obviously struggle to do, and in order to essentially constrain it into the mature form, and these young people require something that the young people themselves don't have the ability to do just yet.
All right. Yeah, it's a real problem with, sex being literally everywhere in your face.
Oh, right. Like, even if you are able to control yourself, when you're either with friends or just by yourself, the temptations that modern society has for you is can be quite overwhelming.
Hmm.
And that's why you
For
see
sure.
so many of my mutuals just go off of Twitter, and it's sad to see them go, but it's also kind of necessary for them.
Yeah. Um, so you want me to go ahead and continue?
Um, yeah, go ahead.
All right. Utopianism presents all its ideals for the future as some golden age reconstruction of the past that we lost. It also pretends to demand that sexual life return the way that it used to be. And the ancient poets were no less eloquent in their praises of free love in the Saturnalian ages when property did not exist. Marxism echoes the old utopians. By attempting to demonstrate the origin of marriage in history, the Marxists seek to delegitimize in the same way they do private property, or even the state, despite the fact that the state has not existed from eternity. For Marxists, historical research is a means of political agitation to furnish him with the weapons to use against the bourgeois order of society. The main objection to this method that produces frivolous conclusions without even thoroughly examining the historical material is not that, but that it pretends to be scientific. Once upon a time, there was a golden age. Then came one worse but manageable. Then came capitalism along with every evil imaginable. The only saving grace to the socialist is that the excess wealth of capitalism has made it ripe for socialism. Um, so basically, social Marxists have like this weird I guess they get it from Hegel or something, but like they have this weird theory of history that really just picks and chooses like I guess certain common things and then just says, okay, well, this was happening in society because of this institution was here. And so they will like track all these things across history and say, okay, well, this is a bad thing because it resulted in all these. Um, and it's just terrible science.
Right, and Hoppe does try to correct some of it in his lecture, "The Errors of Marxism,"
Hmm.
um, where, in terms of at least their exploitation, um, the the history of exploitation that Marxists have, he is able to find the fatal flaw and then change it and show essentially the libertarian view of the exploitation of masses, which is not based on capitalism, but based on the exploitation of lords and kings against lawful private property.
Mm-hmm.
But this has nothing to do with the what we are talking about here, which is in terms of sexuality and marriage. Um, but
Yeah,
this
there's a
is
couple points where he just kind of throws some stuff in here.
right, and so if you were more familiar with the Marxist view of history, it would make more sense what he's saying here. So, the Marxist view of history is that everything is progressing towards socialism, and so even though there was a golden age, this had to how should I put this? It did um, it basically, as he states, it kept on going worse and worse. It kept decaying. But this was to only bring about socialism, which is the true utopian society. And so
Okay.
they kind of forced this historical narrative into all aspects of life. Even though, as we will see, marriage in Mises's day of 1922 was the best it had ever been.
Right.
He has to the Marx has to fit this narrative of everything decaying from a golden age into a new golden age of socialism.
Hmm. Well, I don't understand how when things seem to be like maybe it was just like they hadn't experienced the industrial revolution and then and then they did. And I mean, just getting into that, it's going to be a little brutal. I mean, you have to like, build up stuff to like get out of, you know, I guess having, all the I guess diseases and stuff you can get from laboring in factories, or all the like things you can do to hurt yourself back then when things are just starting up. So I can get having that, but I don't but like from what I understand, like the things that Marx would pick out when he was like writing his stuff, like these were only few and far between.
Well, it's
Few and
um
sorry.
when people write of the dangers of factory work, typically they are forgetting that farm work was also dangerous. And the virus and bacteria thing that you brought up, the disease thing, is true. But that has to do with most cities, which pre-existed the industrial age. Um,
Right, and they act like these places just like none of these things existed until like factory.
that they had before. Akuda Daimo says, "I am becoming inactive after the election on Twitter. I'll still be active on Discord though. I've purged 2/3 of my social media. Probably after my ortho. Yeah, no, it's kind of sad that at least for someone like me who is basically always on social media, to see people just leave. It's like, where did you go? You're no longer in my life.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. Like I've been less active on Twitter too, but like I don't know. I'm getting tired of social media personally, but like Discord and stuff, as long as, there's that
Yeah, no,
and I
I'm
can keep in contact with everybody.
I'm no longer making posts like I used to, but I am keeping in touch with all of my people. All of the people I know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Internet's falling apart.
yeah, no, I wish it's actually gonna be kind of sad because the only reason why I'm an Austrian and why like I found Hoppean orthodoxy in all of this is because the internet existed in a state of relative freedom and non-censorship. When I was coming
Yeah,
out of high
same.
school, side as the cultural Marxists um, continue winning, and it's kind of sad because, as I said, like I came out of high school as a socialist, and it was only through the internet being relatively free that I found non-socialist, people that eventually led me to here.
Right. Yeah. I was similar-ish, just always more on the libertarian side, but
Right, and
knew nothing in theory.
one of the only good things about my socialist days is that I never really got on board with the whole SJW stuff. I would be like Shu is on Twitter, where you would make fun of SJWs, but you would just support socialism, which in turn creates SJWs. Like
Yep.
um, so yeah, no, it's a interesting cycle, but
Yeah.
let's go on to section 2. I think we've talked about everything we can on section 1.
All right. Recent ethnographical and historical research, as well as psychoanalysis, has provided a wealth of material on which to base a judgment of the history of sexual relations and a theory of sexual life. So far, sociology has been unable to understand these ideas from these sources. They are not able to restate the problems in such a way that they are adjusted to questions which should be its priority. What it says about endogamy and exogamy, matriarchy and patriarchy is out of touch with the theories one is now entitled to put forward. Sociological knowledge of the history of marriage and the family is so defective that you can't use it to draw any interpretation for modern day. It is only on secure ground when describing conditions uh, in historical times. Um, Under the principle of violence, unlimited male rule dominates. Male aggressiveness, which is implicit in the nature of sexual relations, is carried out to the extreme. Men possess women as sexual good, like other goods of the world. Under the principle of violence, she becomes a thing to be bought, sold, stolen, ordered, etc., like a slave. During the life during life, the man is her judge and is buried with him with his possessions. With almost complete unanimity, the older legal sources of almost every nation show that this was once the lawful state of affairs. Historians will often try to downplay the violence between the sexes in both the nationalistic pride for the past and the painful impressions it leaves on the modern mind. The truth is that the conception of these relations were not from some starry-eyed dreamers longing for the past. It is an image from real life that reproduces exactly what men and women believed about sex and intercourse.
Right,
The prevailing. Oh, sorry.
right,
I had to scroll down.
and so what Mises is really talking about here, in its pure form, existed thousands of years ago. Um, he's not really describing anything that is medieval. Well, at least in the pure form, would be like something that existed in the medieval times or anything. It was really in pagan societies where this type of rule existed.
Yeah.
So,
You can kind of see like some of the pagan socialists still talk like this now, and it's kind of cringe.
yep. Yeah, no, it's also interesting that that they are socialists given this, because usually socialists are all about trying to free women from marriage and not trying to subject um to the man
There's a
completely.
weird there's a weird thing where there's some socialists like think they're gonna have like like the family is going to be state enforced or something. Um,
Right, and so this is really so this gets into something we talk about a little bit later, but the rule of law is that there's equality between men and women, and this comes through the age of contract with respect
right.
to marriage. The age of contract when it comes to marriage makes man and woman equal, which through which things like divorce laws, you're not, they're not able to easily get divorces. You're not easily able to get, um, well, fidelity from a man is actually considered an ill, and so on and so forth. These are all things that come from the capitalist side. And so, if you remember Hoppe's The Socialism of Conservatism, it really is socialism that the age of contract was doing away with. And so,
Mm-hmm.
also, if you know the social philosophy of Hoppe by Kinsella, he goes into how the equal rights between all people is a product of capitalist means. Meanwhile, exceptions to the rule of law, is socialist in its nature. And so the age of violence here is socialist in that it's just whoever can wield the power to do whatever they want is going to be is going to be able the one that is able to enforce their will on others, rather than there being a law that is above any such force.
Right. So it's like might makes right is like primitive socialism.
Right. And so this is one of the big contributions Hoppe's had on social philosophy, is showing that it is actually the rule of law that is inherently capitalist.
Okay. It makes sense if it's derived from contract. Which I mean, after this section, we'll be getting into this for my last part of this
Yep.
episode.
Yeah, no.
So,
The age of violence and the age of contract are just setting up the analysis that happens in the rest of the chapter, so.
right. Well, let's continue on. Um, the prevailing legal and moral views of the time were held not only by those who benefited from them, but also by those who appeared to suffer under them. Their domination is expressed in the fact that they whom claim sacrifices also accept them. Under the principle of violence, the woman is a servant to the man. In this she sees her destiny and shares the attitude to which the New Testament has given the most terse expression. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. Do you have anything to say about that, considering Bible verse?
Um, right, and so this is not a, how should I put this? Biblical marriage is not about the woman serving the man. Well, it is about that, but it's also about the man serving the woman, and so it is to die of yourself and work for the other person, and so it's not a um, one-way street as Mises is claiming it here. It is in fact it is very much a contract between people. It's not just a contract, but we cannot say it is less than a contract. The it is in fact greater than a contract. The whole point of so what this Bible verse specifically is talking about is a reference to Genesis, where woman was created for man, from the rib of man. So man was already pre-existing, and then woman was created to um, be married to man, essentially. And we will see this in the rest of this chapter, that the very nature of woman is tied to being a wife and a mother, and
Mm-hmm.
that these are the greatest joys a woman can have. And so it is true that woman was made to be united with man. And so um, this is not something really that Mises would really um, disagree with, the actual teaching, but it's just when you're outside of the church, as Mises was, you can't really interpret the Bible correctly.
Right, because like if you don't believe or anything, just looking at that verse out of context, just I mean, looking at it out of context for an unbeliever just looks vulgar.
Right, and so instead of this being the so it is true that the woman serves the man, and in everyday life it may seem like she is the servant of man, but as we see with childhood, with motherhood, and having children within the marriage, that woman actually benefits more than the man from this from becoming parents. And so while it is true in some cases the woman benefits more from an aspect of marriage, it is true that men sometimes benefit more from an aspect of marriage than the woman does.
Right.
So it is not always an equal exchange in the marriage, but it tends to balance out when you look at the totality of marriage.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's move on then. Under the principle of violence, no woman is without a lord. Were you speaking? Sorry.
Oh no, sorry, I was stretching.
Okay. Under the principle of violence, no woman is without a lord. Even the not even prostitutes have to answer to the brothel owner. The vagabond woman is free game to which every man may do as they wish. The right to choose a man herself does not exist. She is given and taken and must love as a duty and maybe even a virtue. Only the man can repudiate and divorce his wife. The woman has no such right. These tendencies trumped any attempts to develop equal rights. Some examples like Brunhild, I don't know how to say that word.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, existed, but nobody understands them anymore. The domination of man has become so great that it comes into conflict with the nature of sex, and thus, for mere sexual reason, must eventually weaken this domination. I feel like I missed a part of that when I was writing my notes, but it generally looks like it's still
Right.
coherent.
Right. And
Um,
so this is fairly true that it wasn't until really Christianity until women had something that looked like equal rights in marriage. Because even in the Old Testament law, um, the divorce laws were very, very much in favor of men, and this tended to create a unequal marriage, essentially.
mhm.
Um, and as you will see in the New Testament, the reason why some of these laws came into being was because men's hearts were hard, and he had to wait until the coming of Jesus Christ. And so, especially in the West and in the Middle East, I guess you would call it, the did not start to get erased until 1,000 to 2,000 years ago.
All right. And he's gonna talk about the principle of violence a lot. Um,
Yep.
yeah. So let's continue. It is against nature that woman should be taken by man as a willless thing. Love is a mutual give and take, and a merely suffering attitude from the woman diminishes a man's pleasure. He must awaken her response. The slave and the girl sold by her father must be courted for what a resisting woman cannot give. The man who outwardly appears the unlimited master of his woman is not so, and in fact must concede a part of this rule to the woman, no matter how ashamedly he tries to conceal this from the world. With this factor, the sexual act becomes an extraordinary psychic effort, which succeeds only in the assistance of special stimuli. The sexual act now requires a special psychic attitude to the sexual object. This is love, unknown to the primitive man and men of violence, to use every opportunity to possess without selection. So, right here, we can see that Mises is extremely smooth.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, this is basically saying what I said in the previous, in response to the previous paragraph, that it requires the introduction of love into marriage in order to um, rectify that and make this contractual marriage that we have grown accustomed to possible. And as Mises will point out, it is the contractual part of marriage that is also responsible for the allowance of this love.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it
And
works.
I've never.
It's self
Oh,
reinforcing.
yeah, yeah. I've never heard anybody like call like sex a like a psychic like an extraordinary psychic effort. The language that he used for this section was choice.
Yes, it was very much a interesting. Yeah, no, and it's very telling that he's an atheist because he doesn't also say it's a spiritual effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
for sure.
so let's
All right.
continue.
All right, let's move on. Gotta scroll down a little bit. Um, the characteristic of love, which is the overvaluation of the sexual object, which cannot exist when women occupy a position of contempt. Under this, she is merely a slave, but it is in the nature of love to conceive her as a queen. But here, marriage and love become contradictory, and these conflicts are revealed to us in the epic and lyric poetry of the age of chivalry. These conflicts are known to us because they are immortalized in the timeless works of art imitated today. But we moderns cannot grasp the essence of the conflict. We cannot understand what it is to prevent a solution which would justify all parties, why those in marriage should be separated. And tied to those who I think I miswrote that one. Why those who love one another should be separated and tied to those whom they do not love. Where love finds love, where men and women desire nothing except to remain forever devoted to each other, there, according to our view of the matter, everything should be quite simple. Um, so here Mises is I guess saying that like after love came into being and its basic characteristic is I guess overvaluing someone like above just a sexual object, but like um I guess wanting to have a mutual relationship with somebody um is the only way that that can be elicited from a woman, from a man, basically.
Right, and so it's right, and so love cannot exist in a marriage in the age of violence. It has to be in the age of contract, as we will get into in section 3.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's continue again. If without the knowledge of literature from the age of chivalry and basing our judgment merely on on other sources, we can picture a psychic conflict of chivalric gallantry. Picture a man torn between two women, one his wife and one who he actually loves, or a wife neglected by her husband who loves another. Nothing could be so far from the age of violence. The Greek who divided his time between prostitutes and love boys by no means felt that his relationship with his wife was a psychic burden. Neither did she feel any encroachment on her rights. The conflict in chivalrous love was of an altogether different nature. When the wife granted the utmost favors to another, the rights of the man are damaged. But however eagerly he sets out for other women, he would not tolerate interference with his property. He would not hear of anyone possessing his woman. The husband is offended because her body, which belongs to him, is to belong to others.
Right, and so this is showing that in medieval times this was already in the age of contract and going against the very basic foundations of the age of violence. That
Mm-hmm.
the the fact that we would have a picture of a man torn between two women, one his wife and one who he actually loves, or a wife neglected by her husband who loves another, as those things that are even able to be in the literature, um, shows that it is no longer the time where the man marries a woman to simply bear his offspring and then goes and spends time with prostitutes.
Right.
Um, so, also, the husband required fidelity from the woman, but now, in the time of, in the age of contract, the woman is able to demand fidelity and constancy from the husband.
I meant to look this word up a bunch of times, but I kept forgetting to. I have an idea of what fidelity means. I just can't remember it.
I mean, it just means staying true.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I figured what it was.
Yeah, no. So, yeah, so
Oh,
it's faithfulness to a person, cause, or belief demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support.
okay. That's good then.
Yep.
Um, all right. Where did I leave? Okay, I see it. Love forces the conflict from the side of male jealousy. Man alone, as owner of his wife, can claim to possess her completely. The wife has not the same rights as her husband. In the essentially different way men and women are judged in regards to adultery, and the way they regard the adultery of one another, we see today only remnants of that code. Um,
Under the principle of dominance, love is denied an opportunity
okay.
to develop. Banished from the earth, it seeks hiding places and takes queer forms. Libertinage becomes more rampant and perversions of the natural instincts become more common and disease spreads. Whether syphilis came from America or Europe, it ended the love play of chivalrous romanticism. So it here he says that um our how we view not fidelity but cheating by men and women, the differences between that is a remnant of this old age of violence. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, he also goes on to say that both libertinism and queer forms of sexuality um, are becoming more rampant and perversions of natural instincts. Um, anyways, so under the principle of dominance, love takes queer forms and it becomes libertine, which is an interesting thesis, and I hadn't thought about it until I read about this. So, I actually find this to be quite true because if you look at Greece before Christianity, they had all sorts of homosexuality, but it is within the social institution of marriage where men were not looking for someone to love, but already had the wife to love. that
Hmm.
basically went away. And today we see all of this queer stuff coming up again because the marriage laws has really done the opposite of what happened in the Age of Violence, where it has basically screws over men, and so men have to find other forms of love.
Hmm.
And
I'm. Oh, I'll let you finish. Sorry.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean that's kind of all I had to say.
Okay. I'm kind of curious to like. I wonder what Mises thinks about like just like gay people at all. Like maybe not so much like what he's talking about right here, where like under the principle of violence and such, like these um these behaviors or feelings have a higher chance of festering and propagating throughout society. But like, I wonder what he thinks on like the base level of them just existing in society. I'm curious as to what he thinks about.
Hmm.
Cause I tried to look it up and nothing came up.
It wasn't in the social um beliefs of Ludwig von Mises that we already covered.
Did he talk about it? I forget.
I also forget. Um,
I
it
don't
just
think he brought it up. I think he just. I think he thinks that it's just uh normal that most people are straight, and it's a good thing if people stay that way. But I don't recall anything from that particular essay.
um
Are you looking it up?
yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing I can find is both this saying that bringing up libertinism becomes more rampant and perversions of the natural instincts become more common and disease spreads. When he's also talking about homosexuality, as well as this quote from later on in the chapter that that is why state childcare leads to neurosis and homosexuality. So I don't think he
Hmm.
views it as a purely natural event, but something that exists when there's a quote unquote perversion of the natural instinct,
Okay.
which would make him more in line with Christian, Christian teaching.
Okay.
So
Well, I guess it mostly answers it.
yeah,
Okay. Um,
yeah.
where
So
do we finish section 2 now?
yeah, we did. But yeah, no, it's. Anyways, we'll pick up this conversation when we get to this section because it's basically one of the sections in this chapter that the cultural thought of Ludwig von Mises is quoting from with regards to homosexuality. So
Okay. All right. So section 3, marriage under the age of contract. Nowadays, it is said that marriage has been tainted by economics. The original pure love of the pre-capitalist age has been replaced by money marriages on one hand and prostitution on the other. More recent ethnological studies have disproven this and given us a more accurate view of primitive times. Modern literature has revealed how far removed from reality our conception of rural life was, even only a short while ago. But the old prejudices were too deep rooted to be shaken off by this. Socialist literature and its impressive rhetoric gave it a new pathos. Now, marriage being seen as a contract is an insult to the essential spirit of marriage, and that capitalism destroyed family life. Where the principle of violence dominates, polygamy is universal. Each man has as many wives as he can defend. They are property to him, much like how one views slaves are cows. He demands fidelity from them and may dispose of them as how he wishes, remaining free from any ties. Fidelity in the male implies monogamy. A more powerful lord has the right to dispose of his subjects' wives. Moral reformers did not abolish polygamy, nor did the church combat it at first. For centuries, Christianity raised no objections to the polygamy of the barbarian kings, and by its institution, polygamy was never for the poor man. Only the aristocratic could enjoy it. But this became complicated as more women began to enter marriages as heiresses with lots of wealth, and to ensure the protection of the wealth, women began to enforce monogamy upon their husbands.
It's also kind of interesting that Mises thinks that the church could have done anything when there was pagan kings, because if you know anything about the early church history, the church was actually persecuted under the Romans, and it was not given a lot of leeway in terms of the state in order to say anything about it.
It it was a bit early
Yeah,
to yeah, it was a bit early. Mises probably just wasn't thinking about, the times when he was writing this.
right. So
He
it's
might
it's
he probably would have removed it.
yeah. So it's not so much that it was early. It was just that like you don't show up in another person's country to evangelize them, and then in do this by just saying how everything is messed up with their lives. Like you don't necessarily like that's not necessarily the most productive way of going about missionary work. Um,
Right. The Orthodox are a lot more like peace oriented than like other uh I guess Catholicism and what branched out of that, right?
um, well, you gotta remember when the time where this is happening. This is before the schism, so the Catholics at this time would be considered Orthodox. Like there was no difference between Catholic and Orthodox.
Right, right, right. I mean, I guess what they became, which would be the Catholic. I don't know. That's a tangent.
Right, and so the reason why polygamy was like there was no objection is because the Christianity was actually illegal, and so you could, there would be unless you were trying to get martyred, which no Christian is really trying to get martyred. The
Yeah,
there would be no
yeah,
real way to raise an objection.
yeah. I actually have Fox's Book of Martyrs, and you don't want to be martyred.
No, no, no. Like,
For anybody that wants to go out like that, you don't really.
yeah, no, yeah, no. Probably the um, swiftest martyrdom that I've ever heard about was the Romanovs, who were just shot to death by a mob.
Yeah, I've read and stuff about the October Revolution and all that stuff, but like I haven't actually like gotten on the details on the SARS or anything, but I really want to.
Right, and it's actually interesting that the what Mises has to say about the Romanovs and the anti-capitalist mentality.
I forgot again.
Um, that they actually helped support the Bolsheviks.
Oh yeah, they did, and then they got what was coming to them, as awful as it was.
Yeah, so let's continue. Where did we leave off? At 3. We left off
Um,
at 3.
um, Okay. As the law of contract enters the law of marriage, it breaks the one-sided rule of man and makes woman an equal partner with equal rights. From a relationship resting on force to one of mutual agreement, step by step, woman has achieved the role she has today. The only remnants of the old ways are of no importance. Women still take their last name, and it is a badge of honor. The evolution of marriage has taken place by way of law relating to the property of married persons. The wife was freed from the power of her husband the first time when she gained legal rights over the wealth she brought into marriage, and which she gained during marriage, and that which the husband customarily gave her was transformed into allowances enforceable by law. Marriage as we know it came into existence entirely as a result of the contractual idea penetrating into that sphere of life. That man and woman have all the same rights, that they enter marriage freely, that it imposes a duty of fidelity to one another, that man's violations are to be treated the same as women's, etc., all developed from a contractual view of marital life. And that is section 3. You still there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Um,
Yeah, so
I thought my phone went out for a second.
yeah, no, yeah, no, I don't know what else to say about this. It's just
Wrapping it all up, you know,
yeah, it's just a
the
summary.
view of seeing marriage as a mutual contract between consenting parties who genuinely love each other has resulted in equality between the sexes in a legal sense.
Okay. Yeah, so ready to get into section 4, the problems of married life?
Yep, let's go.
Okay. In the modern contractual marriage, which takes place at the desire of the husband and wife, marriage and love are united. Marriage appears morally justified only when it is concluded for love. Without love between the bridal couple, it seems improper. Even kings and nobility, who often marry for land or alliances, will tell the public that their marriages are out of love, which reinforces this notion about love being necessary for marriage. The conflicts of married life spring out of the fact that passion doesn't last forever in a contract for life. Passion flies, but love remains, says Schiller, the poet of marriage and love. Passion burns away slowly, replaced with an affection only interrupted by brief moments of the old passion.
You can see that a lot with like, you know, grandparents often, you know, they just act like friends, and then every now and then you'll see them be like romantic at all.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is true.
Yeah, so um this is not so for all. To the believer, religion brings consolation and courage and enables him to see himself as a thread in the fabric of eternal life. Others find satisfaction in philosophy. The masses are different in that they succumb to everyday life and become troubled by habit and the passions. The fourth group, um, this is not true for, does not know where or how to find peace. And so, um, these groups, um, it's actually interesting that he puts religion in it, but it kind of makes sense with what he's going to criticize religion for um, a little bit down the line. But these groups cannot tolerate marriage. when the wildfire of the first love begins to die. They make the highest demands on love and exaggerate the overvaluation of the sexual object. Thus they are doomed and love turns to hate. Life with the once beloved becomes torment. And so I actually don't necessarily agree with this, because even with how he describes the religious that he's talking about here, that does not seem like it should be true that they would even value the wildfire of the first love. It would seem like their love, their marriage would fall apart just from a lack of love itself, rather than just the passions not leaving.
Yeah, I can
So,
see that.
um, anyways, but what he's criticizing here has nothing to do with social conditions. These marriages are not correct because they live in a capitalist order of society and the means of production are privately owned. The disease germinates not, sorry, not without, but from within. It would be fallacious to say that the change in marriage to a contractual one is what is causing these issues. Before the age of contract, people did not expect to love in marriage, but these concepts were entirely separated. We cannot blame marriage or the social environment because it is unable to change our earthly life into an infinite series of ecstatic moments. And so, what he's saying here is that even marriage, in when it's wedded with love, cannot always maintain the initial passionate love that you have at the beginning of a relationship. It
Mm-hmm.
it will inevitably lead to a slow burn instead of the ecstatic moments of early romance. And so this is just kind of true, and it's kind of a more mature form of love than just having affection for someone, because we can have affection for many people, but this entire slow burn of love for one person is really only capable with a single other person. It's not really capable with many people.
Yeah, that's a lot of emotional work.
Yep.
All right.
So, as a social institution, marriage is an adjustment of the individual to the social order by which a certain field of activity is assigned to them. Now, that is a view on social institutions that really leads to peace rather than conflict. Because if you're constantly trying to do away with any type of social institutions, as we will see later, that inevitably leads to a destruction of society.
Mm-hmm.
So, despite this, the few exceptional individuals cannot be bound by this coercion. Genius cannot be bound for long, even for the comfort closest to it. It is a rare happiness for a genius to find a woman willing to go along with a man in his solitary life of being a genius, as she will always occupy a small place in his life.
Damn.
So, I wonder if Mises here is talking about himself.
I don't know. I have not read Margaret's book about her relationship with Mises, but it seemed like they were pretty close since she would literally type out everything that he wrote for at least Human Action.
Yep.
So
So,
I don't think that was the case for Mises. It seemed like they were really happy.
right, but he even talks about how some geniuses have like normal reactions to marriage and love and sex, but still, the fact that they are geniuses leads them to a more solitary life that is a strain on, um, marriage. That's what I'm kind
Right.
of wondering. Like, is he talking about his own marriage here?
I mean, he would know
Yeah,
if he wasn't. Hanging out. If it wasn't about him, it was about somebody he knows.
yeah. So, anyways, let's just continue. It's just an interesting thought.
Hmm.
This genius is rare, and a social institution is not made impossible because one or two exceptional men are unable to adjust themselves to it. Um, and it's actually interesting that he goes into how many men, when their marriage fails, they try to claim that they were a genius and that they were just this exception to this marriage rule. But Mises here is like, no, geniuses are rare. There's only like one or two of them, in a nation. It's not there's no like huge percentage of geniuses that are unable to be um, adjusted to this social institution. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's get into feminism because that's what basically the rest of this chapter is going to be about. The attacks launched by feminists of the 19th century are entirely different. They claim marriage forced women to sacrifice personality. It gave men space to develop his abilities but denied women all freedom. It is said the nature of marriage debases the weaker woman to be the servant of man. Feminism states that women must abandon this yoke if they are to pursue their sexual desires and develop their individuality.
Look, I've every feminist I know thinks exactly the same thing, says exactly the same things, and they all believe exactly the same things. I don't know what type of personality they're trying to develop, but whatever it is, I hate that bitch.
Yeah, no, and it's actually interesting because at the end of the section 5, which is the next section, he will go into how it's actually marriage that allows for the development of a woman's personality, but it's developed differently than how men develop their personality. So the radical wing of feminism, which holds wholeheartedly to these beliefs, the expansion of women's powers overlooks that the expansion of women's powers are not inhibited by marriage, but by the absorbing form in which the sexual function affects the female body. Pregnancy and the nursing of children claim the best years of a woman's life, the years in which men spend his energies in great achievements. One may believe this to be an injustice of nature, or it is unworthy of a woman to be concerned with childbearing, but this does not alter the facts. A woman may be able to choose between the profound womanly joy, the joy of motherhood, or the more masculine development of her personality in action and endeavor. She may not have this choice. It may be that in suppressing this urge towards motherhood, that she does herself an injury that affects all other functions of her being. Extraordinary women,
Facts.
extraordinary women may be able to accomplish great things in spite of motherhood, but genius and the greatest achievements are denied to her.
Fertilize your eggs.
Yet, if you don't use your eggs, they're gonna fry.
Yep.
But
Molyneux,
yep,
new
Malin,
moment.
egg check. The this is actually kind of what I was just talking about. The more masculine development of her personality in action and endeavor, it is not a very feminine way to develop your personality in with regards to action and endeavor, like entrepreneurial action and workplace and such things like that. It's something else entirely that women develop their personality in,
Mm-hmm.
and it is
And
it is
and men. Oh, sorry.
very telling that as women came into the workforce, delayed children, delayed the actual development of their personalities through feminine means, but instead tried to become men that were female. That that women's happiness has declined ever since they decided to do this.
Yeah. And I think I forget if it was like Carl Jung or somebody in that area, but like men and women are supposed to develop like their opposite sides of themselves in old age, actually. Um it it's one of it's a natural, it's supposed to be like a natural part of life. Like you're not supposed to be doing this in your young years. You're supposed to, get get to be having a stable family and procreating and having children. And then once all that passes, you're supposed to naturally develop that other side while still retaining what you are. I mean, you can't biologically change, obviously. But this what the feminism has done is seems like it's tried to take that development of that part of the personality and have it started way young.
Yep. And so women are basically trying to become men in terms of developing their personalities like men do, but it just turns out that they become unhappy women.
Yeah.
So far as feminism just wants to have equality of law with men, it is just liberalism. When it goes beyond this and attacks the social institutions, which under the impression, sorry, attacks the social institutions under the impression that it will be able to remove natural barriers, it is the spiritual child of socialism. It is the nature of socialism to find facts of nature as the root of social institutions, and to endeavor to reform by attacking these institutions. And so, yeah, liberalism had already done everything that feminism really wanted it to do. And technically, what liberalism did for women was already done to a large extent before liberalism was a thing. Because
Right. It
liberalism,
just kind of sealed it.
yeah, liberalism just made it more consistent, essentially.
Hmm.
Because if you look into the law, there's something called femme sole, which is like a female solo, essentially, is what it directly translates to. And so
Hmm.
women could decide to get out of the care of their father, but not take up a husband and just become an independent woman. And actually, my great grandmother decided to do this before women even had the vote. The thing of it is that she did this because she was poor and became a cook at a cafeteria. And she abandoned this when she met her husband.
Hmm.
So it's something that poor families would do, um, which is very, very telling because feminism was very much a rich woman's um, vocation. Because they saw that they had all these servants, their husband was away doing business, and they basically had nothing to do. And so they were like, oh, I should be able to do like my brother does and become a lawyer. Meanwhile, they didn't really see that women who were poor, who didn't have these servants, had to toil all day as a wife, or that women who were not in a rich household that could just afford to um, sustain them into adulthood um, would have to go out on their own like men would and work a job like men would have to do until they got married.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was very much a um, rich thing to be a feminist. And it still is. Like, if you see all these feminists like Emma Watson, they're obviously just doing this because they're bored, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason, and also labor-saving devices like the dishwasher and the washer and dryer have really liberated stay-at-home moms from a lot of their work that they would usually have to do, which makes
Mm-hmm.
feminism more acceptable even to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder. Well, no, never mind.
Yep.
Um,
So, Section
I
5.
guess let's move on.
Yeah, Section 5. Free love. Free love is the socialists' radical solution for sexual problems. The socialist society abolishes the economic dependence of women, which is from her dependence on the income of her husband. Men and women have the same economic rights and the same duties as far as motherhood does not demand special consideration. Note, it frees women from dependence on her husband, but when women get pregnant and have to nurse their children, men still have to pay for the lack of work women are doing because they're in childbirth and child rearing.
Rearing.
Oh crap! That
Right.
was an echo.
I have an echo.
Yeah. Thus, while women may not be married to a single husband, they are married to the state for their subsistence. Since men must foot this bill, men must also be married to the state. And so this is a change of women being married to a husband to women being married to men generally. And this socialization of marriage, essentially, we can see today. It wasn't necessarily in the Soviet Union, but we can see it today in the welfare system and in the divorce laws. Divorce laws, like, it does technically make one man responsible for one woman, but she's no longer his wife, so he does not derive all the benefits he usually gets from a wife.
Okay. Do I still have an echo?
No.
Okay.
It was literally just one word, which is odd.
It happens.
Choice and love becomes so going back to what Mises is writing. Choice and love becomes completely free. Note, thus unconstrained by social institutions, it would become dominated by natural desires, and we can see this today. With the as I was just saying, general rule.
It might be definitely more extreme considering the situation most men find themselves in now. Anyway.
Yep. So, the responses of Western theologians and other moral teachers have been inadequate. The monastic and ascetic notion of sexuality have dominated their thinking, where the sexual desire is entirely and absolutely evil. Their endeavors to defend marriage from a scientific standpoint is a wasted effort, as science is not a judge nor a valuer. It is value-free. And this is a very, very good point, because many people, when they come to science, already bring their values with them. When, in order to do true science, you need to start from value-free propositions.
Right.
Thus, you'll get things like AA saying that Austrian economics is not right-wing, but if you're a practical person and you're an Austrian, you would have to be right-wing.
Yeah.
So, as an Austrian, it makes sense to be right-wing, but the Austrian method is itself not right-wing.
Right. That makes sense.
Naturality, no child has ever been begotten and conceived out of a need the state has for recruits or taxpayers. To be consistent, an ethical system such as Western Christianity, which views sexuality to be shameful, would have to demand complete and unconditional abstinence. If we want life to continue, we should not call the source of which it is renewed a sink of vice. This is the worst poison in today's society. And so here he is really calling out mostly Augustinian notions of sexuality, where the intimacy and sexuality of marriage is seen as a sin rather than a something that just needs to be transformed by Christian love.
Right.
And so
Um,
he wouldn't
I don't know a whole lot about Augustine.
Augustine he spent the early years of his life being a libertine essentially, and he entered the monastic life after that and eventually became a bishop. Um, and
Uh-huh.
so his views on sexuality are very, very warped between his monasticism and his only knowledge of sexuality being this very, very degenerate lifestyle.
Mm, okay. I hear
So,
a lot of people like bringing him up and like, telling me to read like his, I guess, morality stuff, I guess. I haven't gotten around to it, but
right, and so
people have been telling me to do that for like a year now.
And so the West is very, very much influenced by Augustine. Meanwhile, he's just one of the church fathers of the East, and he is a very minor church father of the East because he was writing in Latin. Meanwhile, almost everyone in the East spoke Greek.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so the Orthodox are not nearly as influenced by Augustinian teachings. However, he is still very important to read, but he has several mistakes that you should read. Let's say Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Cyril of Alexandria, before you read Augustine. However, Augustine also has very interesting philosophy, which the East has not developed nearly as much. So, for instance, the City of God um, shows a very interesting, at least for a libertarian, it would show a very interesting view of church and state.
Hmm. Unfamiliar with it.
You're unfamiliar?
I'm pretty sure I'm unfamiliar with Augustine's
Yeah. And so the City of God
thing.
is the most interesting thing for me from Augustine, but he also has some good writings that, if you just trim away some of his errors, become completely good and accepted.
Okay. Well, sorry to get you on that tangent.
Oh, no problem. It's actually the reason why the West is so influenced by this one church father that has led to a lot of the Western errors, essentially, because instead of being based on the church fathers as a collective, they're very, very, very much based on this one guy.
Hmm.
And so any
That's interesting.
yeah, and so their errors, so they're being based on one guy. Really, any errors that Augustine has, you will see the errors propagated throughout Western Christianity.
That's really interesting because AA promotes Augustine a lot, but after that recent Christian Council stream, everybody has been like, including AA, has been like Orthodox has won. Um, so I would actually like to see Augustine discussed, critically on
Right.
his show.
On AA shows, he might not be able to do it because he doesn't necessarily know all the other church fathers yet.
Hmm.
Um, but I believe JF has not JF. Jay Dyer has gone into Augustine, and Jay Dyer is a very, very um, good scholar. He's very, very complex, so, like, I don't know if he's that good for an introduction into Christianity, but he is very good once you start learning things to listen to.
The only things I know of Jay Dyer are from the Praxeology Book Club, another podcast. And he had a debate with Jay Dyer. That's all I know of him.
Praxeology Book Club, I don't know about them.
They are. It's a brother. I think it's a brother and a sister, and they just go. The brother is a very well versed Austrian. And he and his sister wants to read the book, so they go through it and just read, and he like explains it very thoroughly with her as they go through it.
Yep.
It's been helpful for me.
Interesting. Oh, I know this. I know this. What's it called? I know this channel. I just looked it up.
Prax Girl is
Yeah,
the other channel.
yeah. She just seemed like an eagle, so I didn't like subscribe or anything.
I don't think she is. It was just mostly educational.
Right, right. But she also seemed just like I only saw the one video. The
Uh,
praxeology series that she had, and I was like, this seems just like very, very basic Austrian economics, just with a woman's face. So it seems like not that interesting.
yeah. Well, hey, it might get other people into it. To be honest.
I mean that is good, but it's also just kind of like I do not want another like libertarian woman running around the internet. Like that's not something I'm that interested in.
Yeah, but the podcast itself is very good. I recommend it to other people.
Okay.
But let's continue.
Actually, I have a question. What were they even discussing with Jay Dyer?
It was human action and um does God act praxeologically, I believe, or something like that. He plays a couple of clips during the podcast. And I don't know if he's a Christian or whatever, or if he's just being like this just for this particular argument is not good. I don't know. Um
Hmm.
but that was pretty much it. Is like, does God act? And under a praxeological, I guess, definition.
So does God act rationally? That is, does God act in order to bring about outcomes? I mean, like, how would you say no to that? Because it would seem that God, like, God employs means to achieve ends.
I think it has something to do with God being limitless, and you have to be restricted to act or something.
Right, but even God, God's acting all the time. So like even to keep things constant, he would have to like this is basically whether God has providence or not, and it just seems like he obviously does. That's just doctrine.
Yeah, I will. I've listened to the first bunch of episodes like several times because I've had to restart it. So I can find the clip of it and then send it to you after this.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Where did we leave off? Okay. I see it. It is clear that sex is less important to a man than it is to a woman. Satisfaction brings him relaxation and mental peace, but for the woman it is the beginning of the burdens of motherhood. Her destiny is entirely circumscribed by sex, but for a man it is an incident. Even women are contemptuous of men engrossed by sex. Men may find it difficult to preserve his inner freedom, but it is not sexual life which distracts him the most. For women, it is the greatest obstacle. Um, do you have
Yeah.
anything to say?
Um. No, that pretty much is cut and dry. That seems to be true. Like if you like, I mean, obviously a dude can't get pregnant, but like he can get the girl pregnant. But like, I mean, you're not forced to take care of it most of the time. And like
Especially, especially,
with
especially,
motherhood comes.
especially outside of the age of contracts,
Hmm.
which a lot of this psychology comes to, because as we said earlier, a lot of the preconceptions comes from the remnants of the age of violence.
Right.
So, continuing. Thus, the meaning of the feminist question is women's struggle for personality, but this matter affects men and women. Men will be dragged down into the lower spheres of mental bondage if women's personalities are not developed. This is what destroyed the Orient. Woman is simply an object of lust, a childbearer and a nurse to them. They have never been able to free themselves in sexual matters because of this.
Yeah, I do find a lot of I guess Oriental philosophies or like anything that I hear out of random it just sounds, yeah, that sounds like a good thing to keep in mind or whatever. They have a lot of good insights, but there is so much that they are also missing. Um
Right, and it's right, and these insights aren't really something that you can't get elsewhere.
yeah, that's true too. Oftentimes they'll be put in I guess a more poetic way that sounds, nicer than maybe some of the ways people put, how to live nowadays, especially in Protestant, Western society. It doesn't sound as enlightened as it does in Eastern philosophies.
Yep. So, midway between the Orient and the Occident is the culture of the Greeks. Greek culture excluded women. And he's talking here about ancient Greek culture. The wife remained in the.
Hey, what is the Occident?
It's Latin for the West.
Latin further west.
No,
Um.
no. So it means the West. So the Orient
Oh.
means.
Oh. Okay.
So the Orient means the East, and the Occident means the West. And so midway between the East, and the West is the culture of the Greeks.
Ah, I got you. I got you.
Greek culture excluded women. The wife remained in the home while the man's love was for women in the culture. Soon his love of courtesans was not enough and turned to love boys. To him, the love of woman was a merely gross sensual satisfaction. And so we can see here that the age of violence, that where women are just something that you keep in the home like you do, or keep on your estate like you do a cow, leads to loving not Protestants, prostitutes, and and gay sex.
That's man, that's weird. Like modern times,
Yep.
and then I mean the similarities I guess are beginning to blend again, but like I don't think it's at this level yet.
Right. So courtesans are not just prostitutes, but they are also like escorts, where they will pretend to be um, affectionate towards you.
Okay, I didn't
So
know that there was a
difference.
difference. I thought it was just a nicer way to say prostitute.
No, so they were higher class prostitutes that you could take to a gathering or a party, and they would
Hmm.
be able to like show up that they would be kind of classy for a prostitute.
Yeah, yeah. I knew of that thing. I just didn't know it was a difference. But that's learn something new.
Yep. And that's why they were part of the culture, because courtesans were definitely part of the whole, um, especially the rich and noble culture back then. But like I said, this
Hmm.
is really ancient Greek culture before it was Christianized, so that was very
Yeah.
long ago. Which the
For
reason
sure.
why I keep pointing out this is because many, especially feminists, try to say that this what is being said here was true of women like 100 years ago, and it's just kind of laughable. Um,
Yeah.
they're like, we just, feminists would say feminism gave women their independence. It's like, no, 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 no. It was gotten a long, long time ago, way before feminism was a
Yeah.
thing.
Most women actually just kind of liked the way things were.
Yep. Um, anyways, to Western man, woman is the companion. To the Oriental, she is the bedfellow. This was not always so, but she won it with the evolution from the principle of violence to the principle of contract. And so we can see that women became um, far more respected once contract and thus the ideals of capitalism were put in place in marriage rather than the principles of socialism.
Right.
So, so I had to um, just quote this. Mises assumes that the extension of voting rights to women will not affect the political landscape, and it's just it shows kind of the timeline of when this was written. It really dates this book to 1922.
He was so optimistic.
Yep. Um, as I kind of talked about earlier, women have really used the welfare state and the divorce laws in order to make men married to the state and for women to just get subsistence from the state without having to do all the wifely duties that the age of contract would have required her for.
Well, as we learned, we don't need welfare anymore. Just set up an OnlyFans and you will be provided for.
It's actually really funny because on like something like 70% of the OnlyFans account make less than $5 a month.
Pareto.
Yep. Yeah. No.
Can't escape it.
Mises thinks that the curtailment of a woman's right to hold public office is less to do with legal limitations than her sexual character, and this is largely true. That in places like just look at America, we have not had a female president yet, and that is mainly due to women in large proportions still being stay-at-home mothers in America. Meanwhile, in other
Hmm.
places which has very much socialized the cost of child rearing, they've had more female politicians.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, so when you basically get the entire country to pay for women going into the workforce after they have children and paying them to have children as well, they women are able to have become major political figures. But when that's not true, like in America, because we don't have paid family leave, we don't have um, as much welfare as, let's say, Sweden. They still can't become president.
Um, in all the countries where they have tried to enforce more equality, that the differences become between men and women become starker.
Right, and so this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with how the social institution really controls the base instincts, but once you get away from this social institution constraining this social instinct, it becomes way more prevalent. This was what I was talking about with it was at the beginning of section 4, I believe. Um, no, it was at the beginning of section 5. Thus, unconstrained by social institutions, it would become dominated by natural desires, which 20% of the men get 80% of the women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just showing that these social institutions constrain both men and women, and actually it becomes a far more mutually beneficial society and more productive society through through contract than it does through this socialization, which either can happen through pure violence, which the Age of Violence showed, but also through the socialization of intersexual relations that we have today. So, Mises says that feminists are abusing equality before the language of equality before the law to push for equality between the strong and the weak and the talented and the untalented. And this is why I have always liked the rule of law more, because technically the equality before the law and the rule of law mean the same thing with regards to what Mises is saying. But the rule of law actually gets into the ancient rights, while the equality before the law has the word equality in there, and it allows people to push actual egalitarianism into the social consciousness, because people are not studied, and so they won't know that equality before the law does not mean like anti-discrimination laws. It does not mean that like you get Title IX, which requires both a male and a female tennis team. Like, that's not what equality before the law means. Equality before the law means that let's say we were to have a law against murder. You can't say that this group of people can murder but not this other group.
Right.
I mean, that should just make sense to everyone.
Right. The rule of law literally means that all people are ruled by the law.
Right, and that is the exact rule of the law. That it's not something else. So they wish to abolish marriage so that women may be liberated. What they fail to recognize is that there is nothing stopping a woman who seeks joy in a career from renouncing love and marriage. That she is unable to do so stems from sex possessing her whole personality. Abolishing marriage would not make women any freer, but would take away from her the essential content of her life.
Yep.
Women struggle.
Women are more miserable.
Yeah, women become more miserable, and we can see that with the introduction of women into the workforce and denying their natural role in marriage. Women's struggle to preserve her personality is part of the struggle for personal integrity that characterizes the rationalist society of the economic order based on private ownership of the means of production. All of society would fail if women fail to develop their ego and unite with men as equal free-born companions.
Happening.
Yep. And so, yes, I will return to that after this next paragraph. To take away a woman's children is to take away a part of her life, and children are deprived of the most far-reaching influences when torn from the bosom of the family. From parents, the child learns to love. It is no coincidence the notions to tear children from families and entrust their care to the state started with Plato. who saw only the satisfaction of physical craving in the relations between the sexes. And so, um, here we see that this whole notion of motherhood, the denigration of motherhood, actually comes from seeing the satisfaction of physical craving in the relations between the sexes rather than a lifelong bond, as well as the rearing of children being something necessarily coming from marriage rather than just something that can happen with anyone. So, going back to this development of their ego and being able to unite with men, the evolution from the principle of violence to the principle of contract has based these relations on free choice and love. The wife may demand fidelity and constancy from the husband to whom she gives herself. This foundation is laid for the development of one's personality. And so, we see at the end of this that the very development of personality that the feminists wanted to achieve is actually developed best in contractual marriage, which is based on free choice and love. Because she is able to demand fidelity from her husband as well as constancy from him, she is able to develop this personality within the marriage and do, as I forget who you talked about earlier, but develop her personality later in life, rather than trying to develop it in her late teens and early 20s.
Right.
Yeah, I forget the psychologist you quoted earlier about developing the opposite part of your personality later in life.
Oh, Carl Jung.
Carl Jung. So.
Yeah. Or also Jordan Peterson, if it wasn't.
Him. Yeah. So, Section 6, Prostitution. The Communist Manifesto claims the complement of the family is public prostitution. The Communist views prostitution as a product of capitalism. A sufficient answer to this is that prostitution is an extremely ancient institution. It is a remnant of ancient morals, not a product of new ones. The most powerful influence against it today is marriage. The fidelity of man to a single woman is one of the principles involved in the equal rights of men and women, and is therefore an ideal of the capitalist age. Another example of something that exists in society that has nothing to do with capitalism or liberalism is militarism, which keeps young men away from marriage longer than they wish. But it is anything but a product of peace-loving liberalism. And so just because things exist alongside capitalism and liberalism does not mean that they are a product of it.
Right. It's really frustrating when people say like poverty is a result of capitalism as well, and things like I can't wrap my head around how you can think that.
Oh, this is something not well thought out, but the basic premise is that capitalism is what creates scarcity. And so once you get rid of capitalism, there will be no more scarcity, and therefore you will not have to work for things. You'll be in a Garden of Eden.
I've read the Communist Manifesto, but I don't understand how, with that explanation, you can even conceive of that being true. Maybe it's just me and I'm like
No,
naturally in this direction anyway. But yeah.
no, it's something that doesn't make a lot of sense once you break it down. That's the reason why, as we covered last time, the socialists need to obfuscate the discussion.
Right.
So, continuing. Some women prostitute themselves because they want men, and some because they want food. Many prostitutes want both. The economic incentive to prostitute will dissipate when incomes are equalized, but that doesn't mean that new social sources of prostitution could not arise. Um, Something to note about this is that it is the capitalist marriage that is the main detractor to prostitution, as covered in the previous paragraph. And so it would seem odd to get rid of the only main detractor um, to prostitution, that it would all of a sudden go away like the socialists believe it would.
Yeah.
Also, there has not been a socialist society that has allowed for no work. Um, Everyone,
It's literally slavery.
yeah, and so even if um, so it's not so much that food is guaranteed to someone, like the incomes are equalized, but they must still work, and that does not mean that they will necessarily stop working as prostitutes.
Oh no. They won't be prostitutes. They'll just be professionally raped.
So, continuing it, so in order to wrap up this chapter, it is the study of the relations between the sexes where our thought must be clarified and remodeled the most. Contemporary treatment of this problem is riddled with prejudices of all kinds, and so we've already gone into um, we've really hammered home feminist and socialist critiques of the family, but we've also went into more the Augustinian failures of viewing the family.
What?
Hello? Did you cut
Hello?
out? Did you cut out, Emo?
Hello?
Hi, Emo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wonder what happened.
Yeah, the stream can hear you too. So you want me to repeat what I just said?
Uh, sure. I don't think you. I don't think. I'm pretty sure I heard everything. I didn't leave unless my phone
Right.
put me out and brought me back in.
Right. I didn't hear you leave or come back in. It just seemed like you were just saying hello, 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 like you were cutting out.
Oh, I guess it did cut out then.
So, anyways, to wrap up this chapter, Mises has a little concluding paragraph that I summarize here. It is the study of the relations between the sexes where our thought must be clarified and remodeled the most. Contemporary treatment of this problem is riddled with prejudices of all kinds. And so we've already gone into these prejudices throughout this discussion: the socialist prejudice, the feminist prejudice, and as well as the more Augustinian Christian prejudice of that lead to various failures when talking about the family.
Right.
So, do you have anything else to say, Emo?
um, Not really. I really enjoyed doing this. I really wanted to learn what Mises had to say about how socialism, whether prior to the contractual agreement, and how it operates in like actual socialism, how it just can tear society apart from its very foundations. And I think he did a really good job of it.
Right, and so, um, if you really want to hear more about the Age of Violence, I would say to go read the first chapter of A Short History of Man. There's only 3 chapters, and all 3 of them are amazing, and I very, very much recommend it. However, the first chapter goes into the Age of Violence, and Hoppe has a better history, I would say, um, than Mises does. But also, he's also writing a history book and not, you know, a book on sociology and economics like this book is. So that should be expected. Also, Hoppe is like doing this 60 years after Mises, so he had Mises to work off of.
Yeah. I was gonna I forgot about recommending that one, but yeah, I found those first that first couple of well, I found the whole book really fascinating, but he really goes into like the whole develop like how the family developed over the course of time and how we learned well I guess how we learned how to escape the Malthusian trap and I guess
Yep, but the Malthusian trap is
produce
chapter 2.
yeah first two chapters.
Yep. And
But
so,
yeah, it's just a really fascinating view of history that you probably haven't heard before if you haven't read it.
yeah, no. So, it's actually something that AA wants to talk about, so that's always fun.
Yeah, that's in is it in the Great Fiction as well?
It is in the Great Fiction. So Hoppe has rewritten many things in different books and different formats. And so I'm wondering if everything that AA wants to talk about is not necessarily just within the Great Fiction, but it's also within the short history of man. I should ask him that.
Okay, has he? Well, I can ask that after stream. Um, I was gonna say something else besides that. But I think that's all.
Yep. Um, glad to have you guys again in stream, and I'll see you guys later.